Everything we do is going to be about winning. Okay, we're going to learn to do things the right way, and that's the only way we're going to do them. Because if it doesn't help us, we're not doing it, man. That's just as simple as it gets. Win the Super Bowl.
That's
I
good.
mean it too. You know, one of the things that the only reason you become a head coach in this league, in my opinion, is to win. That's it. That's the bottom line. If you do it for any other reason, you're wrong.
Hey football fans, welcome to the Washington Command Center. So today I want to explain what I think Washington should be looking for in the draft, not just prospects, but what positions, how they fit, and how they'll be used, along with draft philosophy, trade value charts, some trade history, basically everything to just defend my position on why I think we should go with certain players and why I think they fit to kick off this new era of Washington football, an era where this proud franchise can once again command respect. And what better way to kick off this new era than subscribing here to the Washington Command Center, so you can find your way back to some of the most opinionated and ice-cold calculated takes on all things Washington Commanders. While you're at it, ring that bell, hit that like button. It's free to do, and it means a lot. So this video is basically expounding upon my different conversations I've had with different Commanders content creators, Jairus, Protect, Tim, Bloodshot, Rico, and Big Country. I know he's a Dallas fan, but he makes Commanders content, so he's a Commanders content creator. And you should subscribe to all those dudes. But all of us have very different views of what we should do in the draft and the players we should target, along with widely varying evaluations of prospects themselves, and apparently different views on reality. And by that I mean what's realistic and what's not from a possible trade scenario standpoint. And that's what I'm going to go over. Some recent draft scenarios that have happened to show that I'm not completely in fantasy land, and that these kind of things happen pretty regularly in the draft. And just like most of my videos, it's going to be a long one, and there's lots of stuff I want to touch on, questions to answer, and I'm going to be laying out my case here and defending my position on why I think we should be taking these players, the trades we should be looking for, and what we should be trying to address. I'm going to start out here with some draft philosophy to, again, try to dispel the biggest myth in the draft before I talk about possible targets that fit, the team's needs and the scheme. I'm going to break it down a bit more about the responsibilities that players, the different positions, have in our scheme, and hopefully explain why I think certain prospects fit what we do. While, some people might have position roles confused with other schemes and look at me like an idiot, for being into certain prospects. Now, it's not just that I think the coaches should play these players this way. It's how these players fit what we actually do. The prospects that I'm interested in fit something that Ron and Jack have said we want to do. But first, I'm going to start with the myth. No team ever goes best player available. It's best player for me. That's what a team actually does. There's no consensus big board for that, for our needs. Needs are always a factor. It's always a matrix of position value, talent level, depth of the class, how many good players there are in that class decides what a team goes for in a targeted position, severity of need, projection of the targets. If your top guys projected middle of the second round, you're going to know that you can go somewhere else before you go back to him. Every team factors in all these things when making their picks. It's never as easy as everybody thinks this is the best guy in the draft, I got to draft him. So that's why best player available is a myth. I also think people confuse the consensus big board and the value it attaches, which is mostly useful for laying out the area of the draft where most teams would find value in that player. And the big boards that every team make has their own values attached. It's based on what they need and who fits. That's what they value. It's not just like everybody says this guy's going to go here or he's this great. If he's on the board when we pick, we got to take him. That's not how it is. Like Ron is a high character, high athleticism guy. You know, those are traits he loves, and he might weigh production, not as heavy as others do. And this goes along with all these things go along. It's like a litany of size, speed, production. All these parameters they attach to a targeted position. Like that's how they decide who's on their board. Now, we don't have that info. We don't know how our coaches, you know, value each thing. But I always look at the draft from how we play, how like the player fits us and what we need. That's how I look at prospects. I don't rank every player because we don't need every player. Every player doesn't fit us. And some people think that's dumb, like the whole best player available thing. But I just don't even really bother with players that we don't need. And that's why I haven't paid attention to this massively deep edge class or these man coverage corners everybody's got over. I know how talented they are, but I'm firmly against trying to put a round peg in a square hole. I think we look at, what the team does on the field with how Ron, Jack, and Scott are calling things, and we should be looking at where we're struggling to give us the best indicators of what our target should be. And I think all these things line up, to make the best choice for us, in my opinion, to be to trade back. Most fans have called for wide receiver, but recently talks have come out that Ron and the team are confident in the weapons we have, which I agree 100% with. Terry's an elite wide receiver one, and he'll finally benefit from having a high caliber quarterback. De'Ami Brown has a skill set that, will be maximized by Wentz, and a skill set that can make a massive impact. We have a free agent with wide receiver Curtis Samuel that's a versatile weapon we should expect major production from this year. I think at most we need a complementary piece later on. I actually have a whole video coming out soon, very soon, about this, the later wide receiver class, who's available later. But basically, it's not a huge need since we have Terry as our wide receiver one. And the talent difference between round one and round three, in my opinion, isn't big enough to justify our most valuable pick in the first round going for a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 in the scheme of things. And I'll talk about the wide receiver targets themselves in another video. After wide receiver, you have people banging the drum for top elite man cornerbacks. And I think that's a big waste in Ron's zone coverage scheme. People are thinking we might or should play more man coverage this year. Well, I'm here to tell you, knowing the players and the prospects, that's what me and a lot of other people thought would happen this season. With signing William Jackson III, we knew he was a man-to-man corner. With drafting Ben St. Juste, I personally thought he was the best press man corner, or the second best in the draft after first rounder J.C. Horn. We expected the team to play man coverage this year, and guess what? It didn't happen. Ron loves zone coverage, the zone coverage scheme. He's ran it since he's been a head coach. Jack Del Rio tends to lean that way too. And I think William Jackson III was Jack trying to take another shot at adapting an elite, man trait, cornerback to zone, to try to get somebody who could play zone but has these elite traits. And the last time he did that is the same reason I don't think, we're targeting Derek Stingley at all. Since Jack drafted Garyon Conley, an elite man cornerback with injury concerns, in the first, he tried to make it work and lost his job over it. So I really don't see that happening. I don't see us going after Derek Stingley at all. And, the top cornerbacks that actually fit our scheme best in this draft are Trent McDuffie and Roger McCreary, who have been amazing on the field, but both have sub 30-inch arms and are far less impressive, with their physical tools all around. So regardless of fit, I don't hear anybody calling for them outside of my man Bloodshot, who is a big McCreary guy. And McCreary's, probably my favorite corner in this draft too. It's just got to worry about those size concerns. And so that kind of reinforces my suspicion that people just want what's flashy. A lot of people are just calling for what's flashy, the Derek Stingleys, the Sauce Gardners. But I just don't see Ron spending a first round pick on a cornerback. He doesn't value the position that way. He's never drafted a first round cornerback, but he knows he needs corners. He's drafted 10 in his 11 years of coaching. And, he's had some pretty good defenses while doing that. And Jack Del Rio got stung the last time he drafted a first round corner. And like it or not, coaches remember that stuff. But Ron's got a pretty good track record of drafting solid star level guys, round 2 and back. So even if they think cornerback is a need, I think this is if it ain't broke, don't overcorrect it kind of thing. The type of cornerbacks that fit Ron's scheme are undervalued in the league a bit, and there are quite a few guys projected later in the draft that look like really good fits. Guys like Tariq Castro Fields, who's projected somewhere in the 4th. There's a lot of us that still see linebacker as a need, and while it's towards the top of the list, probably second or third, I think there's another position even more important, and it's starting to pick up some steam finally with the media. People like John Keim talking about it, even if he doesn't really grasp what it means, to other positions. They're still talking about it. It's at least getting some steam now. And we all know Ron has been moving this team towards, the nickel scheme as our base since he's been here. He's told us as much, and we've been playing more and more each season. And he's moving towards, that nickel star as its own position. And that's why we went into last season with 4 linebackers on the roster. That's 2 strings worth in Ron's eyes, replacing a linebacker with a star or a nickel player. Ron thought Benjamin St. Juste was going to be the starting cornerback too, and he thought, Kendall Fuller and Torrey McTyer could play that nickel spot. Now, Fuller showed he doesn't quite have the wheels to play the slot anymore, and he's doing a lot better outside. And because of injuries and, them not playing as great, we ended up with Landon there. Strictly because of, I believe, his salary. It's because they had to play him somewhere. But playing Landon there just defeated the purpose of even playing nickel. Like, it made us stronger against the run and screens, than even possibly a linebacker could have. But it didn't give us any help in slot coverage at all, which is the reason you play nickel in the first place. Like, our D line of first rounders were getting little to no production because of the next level, the linebacker level. It was horrible. Jamin was in a spot, you know, in that nickel mic that took away from the best aspects, making him concentrate on play calling and downhill play in that nickel mic. Your nickel mic is basically a downhill guy. So, they took his ability to move around away from him. And then Landon in the nickel didn't give us any coverage help. And, Cole's a solid rotational guy, but not a not a star level in my opinion. And not at all the rangy guy you want at the will, or even the big powerful guy you want at Mike in the nickel scheme. With Jamin moving outside the will in this nickel scheme, he's a great fit. And that's going to boost us in coverage. He can match up with any tight end in the NFL, but the success of this defense rests on us finding the right, star or nickel player. And one at the very least that boosts our coverage ability out of the slot. Anything else is just doing it wrong. If we're looking for another guy like Landon, that's doing it wrong. First and foremost, you want your nickel or star player to match with whoever's coming out of the slot. Wide receiver, tight end, running backs out of out off the edge. You want excellent slot coverage. Like, it's a must. It's a must out of that position. Again, the whole reason you're removing a linebacker from the field is to gain that advantage in the passing game. So our success hinges, again, on landing that right star player. For 90% of the NFL, nickel's a sub package, and they stick their third best cornerback there. In college, star is its own position. It's usually a cornerback, skilled in run defense. For us, though, it can be that linchpin that connects all the talent of our defense together. It's so important. It's like having the right nose tackle in a 3-4. It's like having that rangy Mike in the Tampa 2 that everybody thinks that we should have, but a nickel Mike's not that, guys. That has to carry that deep middle. We need the perfect guy to tie it all together at that nickel position. And I've made it clear in episode 1 of Commanding Excellence that I think the Honey Badger 2.0, Jalen Petrie, the star safety slot cornerback from Baylor, is the perfect prospect to fill that need. In that video, I went over why I think he's a much better fit than Kyle Hamilton, who I was huge on coming into this year, but before, really diving deep into the tape and finding him considerably lacking in slot coverage and as a free safety as well. But Petrie is not just excellent in slot coverage, which he definitely is, but he's rare in run defense from that position, and he would eliminate any weakness associated with even using the nickel. That's all gone. You don't have to worry about, being weak against the run. He takes care of that. And we also get the elite end of the advantages from playing the nickel defense. He's going to give us elite coverage out of the slot. He's that dude. He is that dude. I don't consider the comparison to Honey Badger hyperbole at all. This guy is that kind of special, and it just so happens that, that position's kind of undervalued. That's why he'll be there later. So, with the most important and perfect draft target for us projected at the very end of the first to mid second, and Petrie's only projected that late because of positional value, but that's the way it is because teams aren't going to, not a lot of teams play as much nickel as we do, and they're not looking for that elite nickel star player. But a whole lot more teams are going to start viewing him as that elite do it all safety, probably starting at around Kansas City's picks if we can't make a trade with them to somewhere in that Javon Holland, Trevon Merririg, Richie Grant range, like from last year. So very early in round two, the start of the second round. So between 29 and 38 or so. So hopefully we can get a trade done with like somebody like Kansas City, move back in that range so we can get this guy. We don't want to overdraft. Like, we're in a very unique position here to be able to trade back, possibly add the draft capital that could see us get 2 or 3 more starters while landing the perfect draft target. Like, we're in a great position for that. And I think with the draft, the whole BPA idea kind of falls apart right at the beginning. Like, before Jacksonville franchised Cam Robinson, Evan Neal and Ikem Ekwonu were considered in the running for that number 1 overall pick with Aiden Hutchinson. Now, they're both acceptable as the number 1 overall pick because of Jacksonville's needs. The only thing that changed were their needs. So with Aiden going number 1 overall possibly now, Detroit should take Evan Neal or Ikem Ekwonu, right? Best player available? That's highly unlikely because the 6th overall pick last year, Panay Sewell and Eric Decker, had great seasons. So Detroit doesn't need an offensive tackle, even if it is the second best or possibly first best player in the draft. So need is definitely a factor. Laramie Tunsil decided to stick around with Houston. So the first or second best player in the draft, Evan Neal or Ikem Ekwonu, probably won't even go at 3 either. So they're going to end up further down the board. And it's just the most talented guy in the draft ain't going to help you as much as the 15th best guy if you have 2 guys better on your team at that position, but nobody at the 15th best guy's position. Just like a gap block and the best gap blocking offensive lineman ain't going to help you as much as the 10th best zone blocking guy if you zone block. You know, people still spout this best player available nonsense to try to justify wanting the big, flashy name players, and the players valued around our pick don't fit our scheme or need. Man cornerbacks for our zone scheme, edge rushers when we don't need a top tier edge rusher, possible wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. Like, is that the value at our pick? You know, quarterbacks, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, in my opinion, will linebackers, you know, between us and pick 30. That's what it is. So the idea to just take the best player and figure it out, you know, what to do with him later, that only works when you're starting to build a team. When you're so bad, you can use top players at any position. We're well on our way to being one of the better rosters in the NFL. Yes, our D-line is all first rounders, and they had a rough season last year, you know, mostly because of what was behind them. But for, you know, Chase being the only top 10 guy, like, they're all solid hits across the board. You know, borderline elite players, all first round guys. Not many teams hit their first round picks 4 years in a row like that. Like, that's kind of special. And our first rounder from last year, you know, we tried at a position that wasn't suited for him. That's the only reason he wasn't a hit. I think with Jamin moving to the outside, his true position, that will linebacker, he can end up being a souped up version of Darius Leonard, like he was projected. And he can end up being the 5th hit in a row. Our wide receiver 1 is elite. Our running back's top tier. Our potential wide receiver 2, I believe, will be top tier. We got a potential cornerback 2 of the future. Our current cornerback 2. All these guys were 3rd round hits. We have a tight end with the blocking ability of an elite tight end 2, and he flashed pass catching ability, possibly, that of a high end, tight end. He was a 4th round hit. Our center is a top tier center. He was a 6th round hit. Our long snapper, hey man, 5th round pick. We got a possible 10, 12-year starter. It might have been a bit of a reach, but hey, it's a hit. Strong safety, 7th round. Home run. Okay. Right tackle, top tier, 2nd round hit. The rest of our offensive lines, low priced, high value performance guys. We now have a quarterback with elite potential and, more importantly, a floor considerably higher than any quarterback we've had since Kirk Cousins. We got a free agent wide receiver we expect to, good production from this year, along with, all of our drafted guys here. Honestly, we've been able to hit at a high rate in the draft when it comes to getting starters. And that's what you need to do to be successful. But we need to put ourselves in a position to have more chances to make those hits and put ourselves in the range to get those elite fits. So, along with the idea of trading back to a place where we can target a the star prospect, we need to make sure the star position, let me clarify, the star position prospect, we need to make sure we're taking the right trade partners, and we're always, first off, there are always teams looking to trade up. Quarterback class aside, this is another thing. Teams, have targets of needs and want to give themselves the best shot to get their favorite guys, or at least put themselves in an area that a couple of guys they feel comfortable with will go. There's a very limited number of guys that teams view as can't miss, in that can't miss area. And we're sitting right in a spot where not only could some of the tip of the top value players slide, but we're also in a spot where the first guys of that next tier of position value are going to go. After those edge rushers and offensive tackles go, that group of wide receivers and cornerback are in our area in the draft. And the wide receivers that can be legit top tier wide receiver 1s and the elite man island cornerbacks are right here. Maybe even this class's quarterbacks. So there is a ton of value in our pick. Also, keep in mind that no trade back is ever even. That the team trading back gets the plus value. You don't just trade equal amount of value picks. The team trading back always gets the plus value. And we're trading back. We aren't trading back for anything that isn't value equal, if not much higher value. I think the two possible possible trade partners for us that desperately need to replace the 2 best wide receivers in the NFL, Green Bay and Kansas City. Now, I've had our fans dispute trading back with either of these teams, especially Kansas City, because of how far it is. But like I said, this puts us comfortably in the range of who should be our top target. It also is the most even trade that gives us 2 picks in a range where we could get top end, targets at 2 of our 3 highest needs. So this season's pick value also is viewed less valuably compared to futures. Like usually a future first is less valuable than a current first. But with the better quarterback class coming next year, they have more value comparatively than this current class's firsts. They're not more valuable than this year's first, but they're more valuable than they normally would be, if that makes sense. And that's perfect for us. Like, it'll make teams more likely to give extra firsts they have this year instead of future picks, especially in Kansas City's case, where they have 12 picks this year. Those 12 picks, with 2 being first rounders, put their draft class's cap hit at $13 million, while they're sitting there at $14 million total space. So packaging those 2 picks together to come up and try to land the best possible wide receiver they can to try to fill, some of that hole in production that Hill left. I mean, I'm sorry, Juju and MVS, no matter how fast he is, aren't close to the caliber wide receiver needed to put a dent in Hill's replacement. They're going to need one of these top 3 wide receivers in this class, and they're going to have to come up to us to get it. And I think they're going to go after it, and with all the trade capital they have, hopefully it makes it, we make it happen for them. I hope we do it. Some people have argued Kansas City wouldn't be willing to give 2 firsts this year for 11 and argue that the future will be more likely. Again, I disagree. As I've said, teams are viewing future pick value comparatively. Teams are more likely to trade currents than futures. Plus, Kansas City's future picks don't carry the value that other teams do because they're always late picks anyway. Future first for any other team is usually viewed as like a current second. Well, a future first for the Chiefs is more like a third in value because it's already starting out as basically a second round pick before you have that future dip cost. And with 29 and 30 being, pretty much even value with ours, that's their only hope is to offer. That's their only hope is to offer those 2. And the fact that that's just even value means that Kansas City will more than likely have to include 94 to get into that right value area for pick 11. So we'll be ending up with 29, 30, and 94. And if somebody like Green Bay starts to compete, they might have to throw in 60 instead of 94. So that'd be huge for us. Putting ourselves in a perfect range with an extra pick to grab, our top 3 targets, in my opinion, because that'll have our second round pick right in the range to grab, somebody else I think should be a target. Now, outside of what we could get and who I think are the perfect trade partners, plenty of fans and other content creators have slapped this unrealistic tag on almost any trade back. Like, some from a value dispute area, which, I hopefully address there. Some say it's unrealistic because of value. But some thinking trade backs don't happen. Some content creators have just made it sound like trades don't happen. and some blaming this weak quarterback class. Like, quarterbacks are the only players that get traded back for. Now, I don't know if these guys have ever watched a draft, but trades happen all the time. And I've also been told recently by a content creator that multiple trades are completely unrealistic. That teams don't trade back more than once, which I also completely disagree with. And I got some recent examples here and one not so recent example of what can happen when, you make multiple trades. But let's look at some more recent trade moves around our pick 11 range to see what people are getting, while keeping in mind that, that whole value situation with this year's picks and next year's. So in 2017, Kansas City traded 27, 91, and 2018's first to Buffalo for pick 10 so they could take Mahomes. So that's 2 firsts and a third to move 17 spots. Now, that was before Kansas City's future firsts were viewed as basically second rounders. So it carried more value than the future first did. So not only are their picks less valuable now, they also would have to move a spot further in a trade with us this year. That same year, Houston gave up a future first along with their current first to move up 13 spots from 25 to take Deshaun Watson at 12. Last year, the Giants moved back 9 spots from 11 to 20 for an extra first, fourth, and fifth from Chicago so they could get Fields. You think it only happens for quarterbacks? Well, Green Bay traded up in the first 2 years in a row, both times with Seattle, both times 9 spots, and both times for secondary players, Alexander and Savage. And in 2018, the Saints sent 2 firsts and a fifth to Green Bay to only move up 13 spots to the 14th overall pick to get an edge rusher. Okay, but those are all super valuable positions too. Well, last year, the Jets gave up 2/3 to move up 9 spots from 23 to 14 for an offensive guard, which, brings to mind this proposed Kansas City trade I'm talking about. 14 being less valuable than 11, of course, and 23 were where the Jets moved from, being more valuable than 29. So traveling 9 spots versus traveling 18 spots for a higher valued pick with lower valued ammo is going to bump that cost up a bit for a team like Kansas City and trading up for us. Now, I've had a few content creators or people in my comments tell me that multiple trade backs aren't realistic. Like, that doesn't happen. And I'm like, what? Like, New England is famous for doing it. And plenty of teams do it every year. 2017, Seattle sent, pick 26 to Atlanta for pick 31, 95, and 49. And then back at 31, Seattle traded that to San Francisco for pick 34 and pick 111. And then swapped back 1 spot to 35 with Jacksonville for an extra 6th. And then they traded their 4th and 7th with New England for their 5th and a much earlier 7th. They made 4 trade backs in that draft. Or if we look in 2018, Cincinnati traded from 12 to 21 and then traded from 46 to 54. And that year, the Raiders moved back 5 spots from 10 to 15. And then later on in the draft, they moved from 41 to 57. And then from 70, then they moved up from 75 to 65. Like, they made 3 moves in that draft. New England, the year they traded Jimmy G to San Francisco for a second, they traded that second to Detroit. It was 43. They traded Detroit for 51 and a fourth. And then they traded that 51 to the Bears for a fourth and 2019 second. And then they traded up from 56 to 63 with Tampa Bay. And then they traded 95 for 43 and offensive tackle. And then New England traded 105 to Cleveland for 114 and a sixth. And they traded 114 to Detroit. They made like 5-6 moves in that draft. Like, teams make moves all the time. 2019, Seattle traded back 9 spots from 29 to 30 with Green Bay for 2 early fourths. Then traded that 30th 7 spots back to 37 with the Saints for a fourth and a fifth. And then traded 10 spots back from that, from 37 to 47 with the Panthers for a third. And then Seattle used a fourth and a fifth to move up to 64 and draft DK. So they made 4 or 5 moves in that draft too. The Rams traded a 6 and moved back 14 spots with Atlanta from 31 to 45 for a 3rd round pick. Then at 45, they moved back 11 spots with New England for 56 and a third. And at 56, they moved back 5 spots with Kansas City to 61 to add an extra 5th pick. And traded their own 63 and a fourth for Marcus Peters. So they made 4 moves in that draft. Hell, we traded up 20 spots back into the first in 2019 to draft Sweat. And then after, drafting Terry with our regular 3rd rounder, we traded our 3rd round comp pick back with Buffalo for 2 fourths to replace the 4th rounders we lost for HaHa Clinton Dix. So there's cases of us trading more than once and trying to replace lost picks just a few years ago. So for people that think that it's unrealistic to make possible trade backs in like some of these mock draft scenarios, that's just not how it is. My favorite multi-trade example, though, is from all the way back in 1995. Tampa Bay traded back 5 spots from 7 to 12 with Philly. And they sent a 3rd rounder, and Philly sent them back 2 2nd rounders. Then back in Philly's spot at 12, they drafted Warren Sapp. Then they sent their 2nd rounder and just one of the 2nd rounders that Philly sent to Dallas for pick 28, and then they drafted Derek Brooks. So by moving back 5 spots, they got the ammo to swap their 2nd for a 1st and their 3rd for a 2nd, so they could draft 2 Hall of Famers. Gentlemen, those are the squad goals, and why I think anyone who's saying trading back is dumb or at worst unrealistic is crazy. But now that I think I've established that everything I'm recommending or hoping for isn't, at least it's not pure fantasy. Like, there are bases for this stuff that's already happened. Let me get back to talking about the targets. So, I said earlier that a trade with Kansas City puts us in range to get 2 of our 3 top needs, in my opinion. And I think our top 3 needs are all on the defensive side of the ball. They're the nickel, they're the Mike, and they're the free safety. And at 29 and 30, if we made this trade with Kansas City, I think it's very possible that all three of the best fits for these roles are still on the board. But this is a scenario where the whole draft matrix thing comes in. Free safety is behind Mike as far as order of importance goes, in my opinion. And there are a few prospects later that could still upgrade us nicely at that position. But the best possible player to target, the top target, is projected in that range too, while our top Mike is projected a bit later. So the top free safety is projected around that round. So if the top free safety is on the board there, we should take him. And if not, I think, we grab the Mike prospect, even if it is a little bit of a reach. Even if he might be there, he should possibly be there at our pick at 47. I think if the free safety is gone, we go ahead and grab the nickel and the Mike. But that top free safety target, in my opinion, is Daxton Hill, who's a more athletic Minka Fitzpatrick. With his, versatility all around the secondary, even though his free safety value is almost pure projection because of the vast majority of his snaps coming from the slot, the little we have seen there, along with his coverage ability and athleticism, make me pretty confident he's going to be an elite free safety. And I think his projection at this point are like kind of tricky. Some seeing him as like a mid 20s pick, others seeing him as a mid to late 30s. And that just like, it's very similar to how Javon Highland and Elijah Molden were viewed from the last draft. And just like Hill, like both those guys spent almost all their snaps in the slot and performed at a high level there, but were projected as safeties too. Like it was a very similar situation. Now, Holland had a lot more interceptions. He had 9 in 2 years, and he was eventually taken 36 overall, and he has played free safety in the NFL. Elijah Molden was the best performer of the three and of anybody else in slot coverage in his time in college. And he spent all his reps there, but Molden was projected ahead of Holland by PFF, but still slid to pick 100 in the third. And he's now playing slot corner. So Hill's range could be in, wider than anybody expects. Like, he's a lot like Javon Holland, but has a higher RAS. And Hill's a faster prospect with better agility scores. So I think it's fairly likely Hill makes it to that 29 pick if we can get it. So we could have a real chance to add a Minka Fitzpatrick and a Honey Badger to this defense with one trade. If we trade back with Kansas City, we could add a Minka and a Honey Badger. And that can't be passed on. You can't pass on that if you got that opportunity. Even if the Mike, might be the more immediate need, the guy I think should be our top Mike target is projected, in the range of our 47, pick, even a bit later, according to the consensus. So we position ourselves to possibly land who I think could be our top 3 targets if we're able to make the very realistic trade with Kansas City. We want that free safety slot versatility from our free safety, and it's a big reason we went after Bobby McCain. Well, Dax Hill is that on an elite Minka Fitzpatrick level, and adding him and Petrie to this defense would be giving Ron and Jack the elite of the elite tools to do everything wanted, from a position flex disguising and rolling coverages standpoint. But those two, if we put both those two on the field with Cam and Fuller, who also both have that slot free safety flexibility, and if Jack does his job, quarterbacks should be completely lost after the snap when nobody's where he thought they'd be. And even if we play them straight up, if Petrie's in the nickel, Cam's at strong safety, Fuller's at cornerback, and Daxton Hill's at free safety, they should still be near impossible to beat. And if Hill is gone, we lose a bit of that. But there are still guys that can play free safety straight up a little later in the draft, and have absolutely elite potential there as rangy guys over the top that can cover anyone and get to their level or fire downhill with elite size and speed like local prospect Nick Cross. So missing Hill isn't the end of the world. Just takes a bit away from the special high-end stuff we could have with him there. And if he's gone, I still think at that point the best thing is to reach a little bit for the Mike target to just make sure we land two of the three top targets at that elite level of the draft. Now, I know I've compared Daxton Hill here to Minka that actually went at pick 11, but safeties are hard to project. Safeties that play basically all of their snaps in the slot are even harder to project. But I'm pretty confident that we can still get him with a trade back. And I think out of the two, I think Petrie is the more necessary pick. So I would definitely rather trade back. That brings us to our next target, the Mike. That could be that 30th pick or the 47th, depending on how the cards fall. A prospect with Micah Parsons-like tape and athleticism, but with Pete Werner hype. I think this guy is like Brian Cushing with Luke Kuechly's athleticism. Like, I think this guy's special. But Micah went 12. Pete went 60th. He's projected between them somewhere from the end of the first to the end of the second, while some places have him as far back as 80, which is kind of crazy. But this is the top target I get the most pushback over. I've got guys in different comment sections knocking this guy because he doesn't do this or he doesn't do that. And I got fellow content creators saying he doesn't fit the Mike role in a 4-3 defense because he doesn't have the coverage abilities of a traditional Mike linebacker. Telling me he's going to laugh if we pick him and we see him as a 2-down player in our scheme. Now, everybody, has their opinion. Their guy they think is going to be the best Mike. And everybody thinks they know better than everybody else. But Fan Nation, I'm here to tell you, Leo Chanel is the perfect nickel Mike. Now, you might be confused a bit about our scheme and what Leo Chanel does and how he fits that. First off, Fan Nation, Ron Rivera, our head coach, wants to run nickel as our base scheme. And guess what, Fan Nation? In a nickel defense, linebackers don't operate like they do in a regular old 4-3 defense. First off, Commanders Nation, there's only 2 of them on the field. You know why? Because guess what? There's a nickel defender on the field. And he does what? Guess what? He covers. He covers the slot. He covers tight ends. He even covers running backs if they come out the backfield on his side. In a nickel defense, Commanders Nation, I'm telling you, the linebackers operate like 3-4 inside linebackers. The will linebacker, Jamin Davis, lines up on the strong side of the field where he can use guess what? His speed to cover tight ends, running backs, maybe blitz a little bit. But the Mike linebacker in the nickel defense is more like a jack or a buck linebacker in a 3-4. The nickel Mike is like a 3-4 inside buck linebacker, a downhill thumper controlling the B gap, the guy that does the dirty work in the box. He's going to eat up blocks, he's going to plug holes, and he's going to keep Jamin clean to run and chase and cover. And a guy like Leo Chanel is absolutely special coming downhill. He's an elite athlete with Micah Parsons level explosion. He's going to and with him, you're going to let him pin his ears back and bust things up on the way to the quarterback or the running back. When he's in coverage, it's going to be a shallow zone. And in man, at worst, he's covering a running back. And he showed he's at least serviceable at that. But usually, he's going to be trying to make the quarterback's life miserable. While Jamin, Cam, and hopefully Petrie are all around him in coverage to protect him while he develops. Even though I don't think he needs that. And with his athleticism and intelligence, it's not going to take long even if he does. But for what this scheme calls for from the Mike position, there's no one close to what Leo Chanel offers us. And he's just a special player. He's already a perfect fit, and you just got to find a way to just let him affect the line with his elite ability, go after the quarterback and the ball carrier. He doesn't need to be this rangy Tampa 2 style Mike where he's got to carry coverage down the middle of the field. That's not how the Mike in a nickel defense works. So now I'm having a bit of fun there because people have had a bit of fun with me at my expense, making me sound like I was dumb. But it's all in fun. I just think people are fixating on the traditional Mike linebacker roles way too much. What you need in that from the Mike and the Tampa 2 is not what you need here. People are putting way too much importance on coverage abilities, like we all seem to do. I love a good coverage linebacker too, but I know what we need, and there's a guy out there that is elite at what we need. We see the NFL as a whole chasing these small coverage type linebackers to try to keep up with the passing game, and then they end up with linebackers that are weak against the run and still nowhere near as good as secondary players in coverage. Your Patrick Queens, your Isaiah Simmons, your Jordan Brooks, your Devin Whites, your Devin Bushes. Ron has the answer. Just play nickel. Replace one of the linebackers with a better coverage player. Hopefully a guy like Petrie that makes you bulletproof in the slot and in the flats while having linebacker tier run defense as a former linebacker. And he has Jamin, who physically fills the will linebacker role as perfectly as you can with his blend of speed and size. Add Chanel in the middle, and he can keep everybody clean, boost our pass rush production. And if we could get Daxton Hill over the top, all three of those safeties being able to play everywhere at that elite level, stuff would be crazy. Adding those guys can boost us to that elite, generational, Legion of Boom, Tampa 02 Bucks, 2000 Ravens level. Along with our improvements on offense, if we do this in the draft, we could make ourselves dynasty level legit. And I think this team could be absolutely ridiculous with just those three prospects. I know I've said it a few times. I felt like I needed to tie it all together here, defend my opinion on why I'm pro trade back, defend the fact that that's even realistic, show that it's happened before, how it could happen, the value, how the value makes sense, and just so we could take the steps. So this could be our 2012 draft, like Seattle. Seattle's 2012 draft, they got the last pieces in place and just were unstoppable. So we could make those finishing touches, put ourselves in that position with these last three high impact players to kick this off with a dynasty in this new era of Washington football, an era where this proud franchise can once again command respect. And what better way to kick off this era than subscribing here to the Washington Command Center to find your way back to some of the most opinionated and ice cold calculated takes on all things Washington Commanders. Remember to hit that like, subscribe down below. If you stayed this long, I love y'all. Peace.